GT Racers got a release on the PS2 back in 2004, and it also got a subsequent release on Windows PC, and then a further port on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance in 2006. And this game, like a lot of other budget type of games on the system, focuses on arcade type of elements, where you can race on different types of varied tracks all around different cityscapes within locations around the world, and you have access to a lot of high quality and exotic type of vehicles, anything ranging from the likes of a Nissan Skyline all the way up to like a Ford GT, Jaguar XJ220. Like, they're not official cars, but they're all modelled off of real life branded cars, and you can see that with the shape of them as you play the game. So as it is an arcade style racer, it is very reflective of those type of games, as the tracks are quite open-ended, and graphically they wouldn't be considered to be the best looking racers on the system, but it's easy enough to pick up and play. The tracks aren't overly long, but do have some hurdles and areas that will cause a bit of trouble throughout the races, depending on the difficulty or your skill set. Now, if you're into more mainstream and more high budget racers, this is definitely not that. You would be better looking into the likes of Gran Turismo 3 or Gran Turismo 4 or some other high end racers on the system. But if you are looking for something a little bit different and something that is just quick and simple to pick up and play, you can have a look at this and see what you think. It may not be for everybody, but there's enough features here that will keep you entertained for quite a while. Crazy Frog Racer is a budget arcade style racer that was developed to literally cash in on the popularity of the Crazy Frog character from the TV adverts and music videos of the mid 2000s. And this essentially is more of like a futuristic style Mario Kart clone, where you've different types of individual characters, all with your own unique styles and weapon sets that you can use to take out enemies during the races. But this is not an easy game to play by any means. It's a very difficult game to master, as with the weapons that are available, a lot of them have very little use or have little way of making a difference throughout the races. Plus, the game and the level design isn't the best, to a point that you can go off the maps at any time and you completely lose your progress, sometimes even to a point you don't even know where exactly you're supposed to be on the track at any time. So essentially, even though it's a budget game, it was more or less a quick cash grab to kind of cash in on the popularity of the character, but it wasn't executed well at all, and for that reason alone it is considered to be one of the worst racing games ever to be released on the PlayStation 2, and quite possibly one of the worst racing games to be released on any type of console ever. But if you are looking for a Mario Kart clone and you want to see what all the fuss is about, and just to see how annoying at times this game can really be, then you can try it out for a quick playthrough, but ideally for most people you probably would be best to avoid it at all costs. Doomsday Racers was published in 2005 by Phoenix Games, and this company was renowned for publishing a lot of budget styled games across the PlayStation 2's lifespan, and primarily most of the games range from okay to above average at best. So where does Doomsday Racers fit in? Doomsday Racers more or less fits in towards the latter end of the list, as yes, it's a simple racer to pick up and play. It's got a futuristic style element that focuses on arcade dynamics, but how does it feel to play? Well, you definitely know straight off the bat that it is a budget game, and it's reflective in the graphics and the gameplay style. The one thing to note with games like this is that the development isn't as high quality compared to other more mainstream games that have bigger budgets. These type of games were an entry point for developers or people new to game creation to get a foot in on the door to develop games for the console. So this game wouldn't be the most fun game to play on the system, I will admit. It does have some fun little quirks on it. I like the futuristic element to it, but the tracks are very short and narrow, and it is difficult to win races. But what the main problem with the game is, aside from those hurdles, is the fact is that the level design can can be a bit weird. And not only do you have to deal with very short and narrow tracks, you do have to deal with obstacles that are placed in quite unusual and silly places. Like you can have big stone bricks or walls just blocking the entrances, or you can have like steel poles situated in the middle of the track, and you really have to have your wits about you when you're trying to navigate through the corners, and especially when you're trying to overtake other cars, because you have to contend with the other drivers on the track. Now for what it does offer, it's okay for a quick playthrough, but it's not enough here to glorify playing it for hours on end, as even though the track layouts do vary, they're still primarily the same. They're very narrow and they're hard to navigate, and you will probably more than likely find yourself finding it quite repetitive before long. So it is a budget title after all, and with the likes of these games, that is to be expected with them. So it really just depends on what you think of the game itself. Not the best racer on the system, but if you're looking for something just to have a quick blast through, you can have a look at this, or honestly you probably can avoid it. Drag Racer USA is another budget style title that was developed by Phoenix Games in 2006 for the PlayStation, and this game is more of a low end spin-off and is inspired by the likes of the Need for Speed Underground series that, as we all know, was one of the best racing series on the PS2 and on any console. Now graphically this would not be up to the level of most racing games on the system, but what it lacks in the visual factors, it does make up for in other areas. With it being a drag racing game, you do have elements on street racing, almost like Fast and Furious style, with the ability to customize your cars, and you do have a selection of unique tuner cars to choose from. But the gameplay is simple, it's easy to pick up, it's easy to play, and it is something that is worth a playthrough if you're just looking for something just for a few moments, just here and there, just to have a quick blast with. There's no harm in trying it out. Now it's not going to break new grounds in terms of racing games, as there are a lot better games out there, but for what it offers for being a budget title, it would be worth a look at. Kart Rally was released in 2007 for the PlayStation 2, and this is a budget style racer with the emphasis on racing go-karts. These type of games don't come around that often, and for the most part they've never really been considered to be that good in terms of racing games. Even on the PS1, there's only a handful of games that were ever released that were ever considered to be above average at best. Like, they're fun for a quick playthrough, but they're not something that you would want to play for long term. Now the gameplay is simplistic for what it offers, but it is quite difficult to master, and the collision detection among the handling physics can leave a lot of questions that it can frustrate you when you're playing. But the one thing that really stands out to this game is its rarity, because this game was developed later on in the PlayStation's lifespan, and funnily enough this game is quite rare, so to get copies of it is quite difficult. Now it's not going to break any boundaries in terms of the quality of how good racing games are. This definitely is not up there with them, but it does offer a quick playthrough. It's going to be short, it's going to be frustrating for some, but others may get enjoyment out of it. It really just depends on who's playing it at the time, but it's just another one of those racing games that does fall short in terms of quality on the PlayStation. The golden age of racing was developed and published on the PlayStation 2 in 2005, and although this is a budget type of racer, it is quite unique for various different aspects, as the game focuses on old school racing cars that would have been reflective of the likes of the early type of Formula 1 race cars from earlier periods, the likes of the 40s, 50s, 60s and up, and they were at a time when there was no real safety features in cars. There was no power steering, there was no aerodynamics. These cars were just all out power and just brute forced animals on the track. And it's an interesting concept, as even though there's a lot of Formula 1 and similar type of games that are released on the system, but there's very few games that really focus on the likes of the older type of race cars. Now one thing to note with this game, even though it has a lot of really cool features, the gameplay is difficult. This is not an easy game to pick up and play by any means. it, as it is more simulation focused. It's a difficult game to master and it will test your patience. Only the most die-hard of racing fans will really get any sort of enjoyment out of this. If you're a beginner that's coming in to pick up and play, you will find this very, very frustrating, as unlike other racing games where you do have certain features and assist modes that can help you to keep on track, this game doesn't really have that as much. So you'll find yourself sliding off and crashing into walls an awful lot. So just be warned that it will test your patience in advance, as it just is an outright difficult racing game to get to grips with. It is one of those racing games that won't be for everybody, but if you're a fan of Formula 1 and these type of racing games and you want to have a look into the old school kind of era of what these type of race cars would have looked like, and even kind of get an idea of what it was like to drive them, this would be worth a look at. Groove Rider was released for the PlayStation 2 in 2003, and this is more of a budget type of game that focuses on arcade style elements, but this is a very different type of racer, as it focuses more of nostalgia, as it tries to reflect the likes of the old school Skeletric playsets where you race cars around the tracks at really high speeds with the intention of winning. And this game does reflect that for the most part, with building tracks on different types of household areas and environments, anything from gardens to kitchens, living rooms, bedrooms. It's all there, and you'd be very familiar with that because I'm sure you probably done that as a child when you had these sets growing up. The one thing to note though, that this game isn't an easy game really to pick up and play, because it's not like your typical racing game where you can move around freely, as you are restricted to the lane that you can be in, so you have to make sure you hit the buttons at the right time, or the directional buttons on the controller at the right time, to adjust your position so that you can gain either an advantage or you'll hit obstacles along the way, and then other racers can hit you with power-ups and you can use the same. As a result of the glitches in the game, that can cause a lot of frustration, because the car can fly off at any point in the track, even to a point that it can just explode, or just silly things can happen. And as a result of that, the game did get very mixed to low reviews in the magazines, so it's not everybody's cup of tea. So the gameplay style wouldn't suit every type of racing fan out there, as it can be quite frustrating. Now if you are looking for an old school nostalgic type of experience, you can try it and see what you think for yourself, but if you're looking for a more mainstream racer, this game is not that, so you would be better to look elsewhere. GTR Touring is a budget-styled racing game that was released for the PlayStation 2 back in 2006, and it was also created by the same developers that done GTR 400. And you can notice the similarities in the game, as the game uses a lot of the identical assets and features with the likes of the tracks and even the graphics engine. The only real difference is there are some differences in terms of the tracks that are on offer, but also the cars in question that are being used, as the cars are more touring car focused. They're not high-end exotic sports cars that you would have seen in the GTR 400 game. So the gameplay is simulation focused, but it does have elements of arcade style elements thrown in, and the gameplay overall feels very like GTR 400, but as you're not driving really high exotic and high-end sports cars, it is a little bit easier to pick up and play for the most part. Now it's not without its flaws, as it is a budget game after all, but it does have really decent graphics, and there's definitely enough features here that does warrant a few playthroughs, as the graphics on some of the levels are very bright and vibrant and really colourful, and there's definitely enough selection of cars and features available that will keep you playing for a while. So if you are looking for a good alternative to a lot of these type of racers, the likes of Formula 1, even Gran Turismo, this is another one of those games that would be worth looking into just for a quick playthrough. Hawk Kawasaki Superbike Racing was released for the PlayStation in 2006, and this game was published by Midas Interactive and is a budget style motorbike racing game that offers up a unique mix of different gameplay modes with access to 14 different circuits that you can race on, both straightforward and in reverse modes. You also have access to different production race classes and even sidecar modes, with additional multiplayer modes so that you can play with your mates. You also can experience different variations of weather effects from daylight to like more stormy weather effects, even with rain, that can influence the handling of the vehicles throughout the course of play. The game was also inspired and developed pretty much by the same team that created the likes of Crescent Suzuki Racing, GTR 400 and GTR Touring. They were also released for the PlayStation around the same time, and you can see that in the visual style as they all use the same graphics engine. Now this game is definitely a step up in terms of its gameplay style when compared to Crescent Suzuki Racing, as it is an overall more polished experience, and in terms of the handling physics it is definitely a lot more realistic and has a very authentic feel to motorbike racing games, especially released around that time. So if you're looking for something that is quite unique and that's on a budget but you want something that is somewhat realistic, then Hawk Kawasaki Superbike Racing is definitely a game I think that would be worth a look at. White Van Racer was released for the PlayStation 2 back in 2007, and this is a budget type of racer, and you can see it straight away from the visuals on the screen, as it looks more of like a PS1 type of game or even more of an early style PC game. Graphically, it doesn't hold up compared to other games on the system, as I will admit there are far better racers out there, and it's a pity because the PlayStation is known for some really high quality racers, and it's kind of weird when you look and see the different types of games that were being put out on the system. You had some really epic and high quality titles, but then you had titles like this that were on a completely different level and were not even up to scratch when you compare them to the big budget games. And the gameplay itself is quite simplistic in its nature. You literally just pick a van of your choosing and you go and race. Although the races are very difficult to win because you're so far behind the pack at the start of the race that you more likely than not will never get to first place by the time you get to the end checkpoint, as you're so far behind everyone. And the tracks themselves are mainly identical, and you'll find yourself racing around the same type of environments over and over again, as they are quite linear. There's no deviations or shortcuts that you can use to even gain an advantage, so you're kind of stuck where you're at the time. And couple that with the draw distance of the tracks, you can't really see too far ahead of you, which can hamper the progress and even the experience for some. So this is one of those racers, unless you can find it in a bargain bin that's fairly cheap to even add to your collection, it's probably best that you leave this one where it is and move on to something else. So here we have taken another unique look at a selection of budget racing titles that were released for the PlayStation 2. There are some quite quirky and obscure racing games on this list, and there's also some games that are of low quality, but it really depends on your own preferences as to whether you enjoy these games or not, or if you have experienced them yourself. So I would love to know what your thoughts are on the games on this list, if you have played them at all, and if so, what do you think of them? Do you enjoy these type of racing games, or maybe not so much? Be sure to share your thoughts and stories down in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more racing games from this series in more videos, then make sure to keep an eye out, as there will be more content on the way soon. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated when future videos in the series are being released. And in the meantime, if you would like to see more videos on other budget type of racers that were also released on the PS2, then make sure to check out the playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action. So be sure to check those games out, and I will see you all over in the next one.